Hi everybody, I'm Stacy. I'm a registered nurse. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome in. If you're coming back, I'm so glad to have you. Let's talk about the members on the hospice team. We're just going to revisit these topics this year and go for it again because the best way to learn something is to do it over and over and over again. So let's talk about it. Who's on the hospice team? And if you like what you see here or you want to see more or you're interested in other topics, then I ask that you like, subscribe, and follow for more. Let's talk about the hospice team. I'm a hospice nurse. I am currently in a team director role in hospice, which is basically just clinical support for the team. I provide direction and clinical support for the team. Let's talk about, though, the roles in the hospice team. So we have an RN case manager, we have a home health aide or CNA, a social worker, a chaplain, and there's other avenues that can be provided in the hospice setting, like a volunteer and music therapy. I know that my company provides that, but not in my area. And I think music therapy is really beneficial as an adjunctive therapy for symptom management. Your RN case manager is coordinating the care between all the disciplines. We also have the physician. Forgot the physician, and they're one of the most important components of the hospice team. So the RN case manager is exactly as it sounds, managing the care of the patient. When you come on as an RN case manager in hospice, it's really important that you understand that you are managing the care of that patient. Although we are focused as an RN case manager on that specific disease process and management of those symptoms, we are also sometimes managing the other symptoms that a patient comes on board with, especially if they begin to see our hospice physician as their primary care provider. Some patients want to continue with their primary care provider and use the hospice doc for the hospice symptoms. And that is a possibility. Just so you know, a patient has the right to choose whether they want to continue care with their primary physician or whether they want to switch to your primary physician. It's always up to the patient who's going to manage those symptoms. A lot of times it is easier for the family and for everyone involved for the hospice physician to become the primary care provider. In that case, your RN case manager is managing the care of all of those disease processes, the comorbidities that a person comes on with. Say a person comes on with cancer, but they also have hypertension and diabetes, and they have, COPD, they have all these other things they're coming on board with. Though we are not going to necessarily cover those medications under the hospice benefit, the Medicare Part D or the secondary insurance is going to pick up the medications that are not covered under hospice. So it's really important as an RN case manager that you're aware of all of the medications that your patient is taking and all of the things that are factoring into their disease processes so that you can be managing all of those things. RN case manager is coordinating care for the patient. They are coordinating care between the social worker, the chaplain, the CNA, home health aide, and the doctor. So the RN case manager is really looking at the total care of the patient and coordinating all of those things together with the other members of the team to make sure that the patient's needs are being met. Your CNA, home health aide, is coming in and providing needs for the patient, such as making sure that they get their bath, shower, that their bed's made, that their linens get changed. Maybe they need help throwing a load of laundry in the washer. A CNA can do that in hospice care. Maybe they need help mopping the floor, throwing a load of dishes in the dishwasher. Your home health aide, CNA, can do a lot of little things to help ease some of that load on the family. We have a social worker. Your social worker is there to meet those psychosocial needs for the patient and the family. And they have a lot of good information on facilities, on, DNRs, power of attorney. They have a lot of good information about adjunctive companies that can help patients in the community information. a social worker can help a person find a private caregiver and, start their respite stay. The social worker and the nurse do a lot of collaboration about the patient's care from a clinical and psychosocial standpoint together. The hospice nurse often hears about that need, and the social worker often coordinates those needs. The nurse and the social worker kind of work hand in hand together, or they should. And then you have the chaplain that's meeting those spiritual needs for the family and the patient. Not everybody utilizes a chaplain, but the chaplain can help facilitate if your religious preference isn't necessarily to utilize the hospice chaplain. The chaplain that we have in hospice can help coordinate your needs with the community as well, especially as we think of end of life. A chaplain can help somebody, who is maybe having a different religious background than your standard religious beliefs that you commonly see. So the chaplain is knowledgeable in providing care to all different types of spiritual practices and beliefs. They really are looking out for the spiritual well-being of the patient, whether they have the same religious preference or not. It's really about the spiritual need of the patient and the family. And we have the doctor, the MD. That is the person who is prescribing medications, making symptom management changes for the patient based upon symptoms that are reported by the nurse. And there is also volunteers. So volunteers come into the home. They can play games with the patient, reminisce with the patient, allow a family member to run to the grocery store. It needs to be coordinated, obviously, but your volunteers can be very useful in a patient who maybe just needs someone to chat with. A patient, like I said, if a family member maybe needs to run to the grocery store and mom or dad is bedbound, husband or wife is bedbound, and they just need someone to sit, they can do that. Now, our volunteers generally do not provide hands-on care, so they can't do things like provide personal cares for the patient, but they can meet some of those needs so that the family can just get 30 minutes to themselves, an hour to themselves, something of that nature. Also, we have music therapy where they come in and they play music for the patient. And again, music is such a beautiful way to give a patient relaxation, help put their mind on something else besides what they're thinking about. It's a good adjunct therapy for pain control, anxiety, all those things. Also, some hospices have massage therapists that come in. And another thing that people aren't aware of is that we are not like home health. So it is said that we provide PT, OT, and ST, and while we can provide those things, it's important that families understand it's not going to be in the same capacity of a home health agency who is providing physical therapy once a week for a patient to improve their walking, for example. In hospice, those services would have a specific goal, a specific end date, and they would be short-term. But those are things that can be provided through hospice. I think, though, that sometimes there's a misconception about what that looks like for a hospice patient. Because a lot of times when we get to the hospice part of the journey, a person is at end of life. They're not wanting aggressive treatments, and they're not progressing in therapy, which is how they ended up getting a referral to hospice. But I think that that's a hard thing for families to accept. Behind the scenes, you have the volunteer coordinator, your team directors, your team assistants. You have your executive directors or administrator, your DCO, which is your director of nursing essentially. And they are managing the clinical operations, and your business office people. There's a lot of people behind the scenes working together for patient care. And it's amazing because, we get to know those patients at a different level, from a different standpoint. Our TAs are interacting with families sometimes. Our DCO is certainly interacting with families and patients, and our executive director is certainly having those interactions. So I know on my side of things, I still do patient care. I still go out and see patients. I do admissions. I still sometimes carry a caseload. So I still get to be part of the clinical group, which is something that I love about my role, and being a nurse. I still get to be a nurse, but I also get to learn and grow in a different area of my team. And I think that that's a wonderful thing about hospice, and that's your hospice team. So one of the things with the team members that we're talking about, which would be your RN case manager, your home health aide, your social worker, your chaplain, your doctor. Sometimes we have a dietitian. I forgot to mention that. We do have nutritionists. We have bereavement people on board. All of those people come together weekly in a meeting called IDG or IDT, where we discuss our patients weekly, and the family members are welcomed to come to those meetings if they so choose. We are discussing our patients' decline, whether they're still meeting eligibility to remain on hospice services. We're making changes that sometimes need to be made during those visits, discussing certainly there are times when a person is not eligible to remain on hospice, and we don't want to keep them if they're not meeting that criteria. So you come together weekly, you have a meeting, and you discuss your patients' progress to see where they're at in their journey. And it's a good time to review suggestions, ideas, tips. When you're in that meeting is a wonderful time to discuss something that you may be seeing as a challenge in your patient care. Because when you're an RN case manager, sometimes you just don't have the answer. And someone else has experienced what you're going through, and they might have the solution that you need. And always when you're putting all those heads together, the ideas are flowing, and you're going to get a better outcome by bouncing it off of other people sometimes than just trying to go at it alone. In hospice, sometimes it can feel lonely because you're out in the field, you're seeing your patients individually. You're not in a building working with your coworkers, of course, unless you're in an inpatient unit. So in hospice, we do have inpatient units where it's like a facility for hospice where they're managing uncontrolled symptoms. I think I've worked in those environments to help out, but I love working in hospice because you're not confined to the inside of a building all the time. You are getting out, seeing patients, getting out, getting fresh air, looking at the scenery, clearing your head. There's a beauty to that drive time that you get in hospice as well. And the team members that you're most interacting with would be your home health aide, CNA, and your social worker tend to be the people that you interact the most with as an RN case manager. A lot of people have their own religious, spiritual support, and they don't always accept the help from the chaplains. I think that would be beneficial for them sometimes, but a lot of people prefer their own church, Some people don't accept that psychosocial help, but you still have a social worker who's responsible for that area, and you can always communicate with your social worker on ideas. Sometimes as the RN case manager, you're the only person that is going into that home. Some patients aren't even allowing a CNA. So as an RN case manager, you're a very crucial part of the team in advocating for the patient and getting them those services that they may not understand that they need, that they would benefit from. A lot of times a person would really benefit from having a social worker or having a home health aide, and they're just not able to accept that mentally yet. But as an RN case manager, it is your goal to provide that education and to get those services started as they need them, because that's coming with symptom management, and comfort care is making sure that their psychosocial needs are met, that they are spiritually fulfilled. You are asking about those things as an RN case manager. You wouldn't think that, but you are addressing if their spiritual needs are being met, and if they're not being met, you are advocating to get those needs met. I know that I have had patients who are not Christians, and they need the benefit of the chaplain helping find those services that are not Christian oriented. And your chaplains do have connections in the community to involve if you don't have a church family, or a spiritual support system, they can find someone who aligns with that and get that going for a family or a patient. And I think that that's a very beautiful piece of our chaplains. I love my CNAs. I love my CNAs. They are the eyes and the ears before me. Together, we are the eyes and ears, the nurse and the CNA, the social worker, the chaplain. We are putting the pieces together as a whole. You know, sometimes the chaplain will see something that the nurse doesn't see. Sometimes the social worker will see a decline that you're not seeing when you're there. As an RN case manager, I found that if you go at different times of the day, sometimes you'll catch something that you didn't catch before, because people get into a routine and you begin to see them a certain way, and you're suddenly not seeing any decline because you get into this routine of going and spending your 15 or 20 minutes with the patient, and then you're not seeing any decline. But if you go at a different time, or you ask the perspective of your social worker or your CNA, you might get some different feedback on what's going on with the patient that you're not seeing when you're there. I also encourage you to utilize your team to the best of your abilities. Reach out to your team, talk to them, communicate with them throughout the day. I know that the team members that I work with are pretty good at communicating with each other, and that is the beauty of working in hospice, is that even though you're independent and you're out there all alone, sometimes you're not really ever on your own. You have a whole team behind you to talk to get support from. And I think that the way hospice is set up is a wonderful experience for me as an employee. And I have really enjoyed working in hospice, truly. A lot of times people will say to a person, what brought you to hospice? Why did you choose hospice? And for me, it was truly the ability to have that one-on-one time with a patient and be part of that journey with them, and getting to know the members of my team as I've worked through hospice has been a good experience for me. I think that it's helped me to understand different perspectives of what my patient is going through. And I think it also takes me back to when I worked in a facility and you were looking at those different aspects of a patient. You did have a social worker, you did have a CNA, and your physical therapist, occupational speech therapist. You had all of those things in a facility that were right at your fingertips. And it's good to know that you have all of those things in hospice, just a phone call away most of the time. And something that you can do with your team members is joint visits. Say you have a patient who is exhibiting certain behaviors, or you feel uncomfortable going in there alone. You can take a social worker with you. You can go together with your CNA. It's important that you understand when to ask for help from your team members too. You're not alone when you're working in hospice, and I would recommend anybody who's interested in it to check it out. It's a whole other world. You got a learning curve that you got to get through first, but once you get through it, if you love it, you love it, and you'll know right away if it's where your heart is at. But that's the hospice team. If you are interested in hospice, then I suggest that you look into that for yourself. If you're an RN, CNA, social worker, chaplain, and you want to provide help or make a difference in somebody's end-of-life journey, then I encourage you to look into hospices, because they're always needing fresh faces. And sometimes, people aren't cut out for it, and so sometimes there's a little bit of a turnover. But I encourage you, if you have a heart for it, to go for it. And if you like what you see here and you want to see more, then I ask that you like, subscribe, and follow for more. And I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.